Welcome back to the Cook the Books podcast. We are on season three. Can you believe it, Kels? We've already made it to season three.
Who let us? Who let us? Who
I
who who has left us unattended for 3 seasons?
Caitlin. I blame Caitlin.
Caitlin. Mm-hmm. Because
Yes,
Victoria
Caitlin.
would never.
No, Caitlin is operation, so this is her fault.
Yes, it's her
Um,
fault.
so we have with us today our very first guest of season three. And I will let them introduce themselves. So Morgan, go ahead.
I'm special. I didn't realize I was the first guest of the season. I knew I was early. I didn't know it was first.
Yep.
So I am S. Morgan Burbank. Pronouns are they, them. I am a writer in a couple different mediums. So I primarily write novels as my main writing experience. My works tend to focus on mental health, sexuality, love, relationships, told through the lens of varying genres. I specialize a little bit in sci-fi and dystopia, but like especially when I get into shorter fiction, I tend to genre drift a lot more than my longer fiction. Um, I have 3 books out in the world now. My book of short stories that I published, self-published in 2016. My debut novel came out in 2021, and then its sequel came out in January of this year. And then I also write visual novels under a pen name as well. Working on my first one, and it's it's a progress, especially when you're a one-person game studio for all intents and purposes. Yeah.
When you have
Excellent.
to
Well,
be when you have to be CEO and janitor.
Yes. Yes, pretty much.
yes.
No one cleans up my code but me.
Yep.
Well, we are super excited to have you, Morgan, and I'm really excited to jump into our main topic on visual novels a little bit later on in the episode. But first, everybody's favorite part of the Cook the Books podcast, Kels, kick us off with the hot topic for the week.
Well, 2024 has been a very interesting year so far. There's been a lot of talk about piracy in recent months, especially, primarily more with TV shows and movies, because according to Sony, buying isn't owning, which of course has given rise to the idea that if buying isn't owning, piracy isn't a crime. But authors have been dealing with piracy for God knows how long. It's been the biggest problem that we face. And unlike big corporations like Sony, we don't have, $1 billion just sitting in our bank accounts collecting dust while we're picking out a fifth home in the Champagne region of France. It's not something that we're doing. Most of us, especially indie authors, we're trying to make this our careers, and pirating our books really hurts us. So our editor-in-chief, the lovely Victoria Moxley, the beautiful goth queen herself, she reposted a video about some authors that she was promoting on her TikTok page, and how those authors have said that they found their work on pirating websites and they would much rather people just come to them and say, "Hey, I can't afford to get your book. Can you please give me a free ebook copy?" And Victoria, our editor-in-chief, fully on board with that, especially if the person that the ebook is given to will leave a review in exchange. So like we said, this piracy has been a problem that authors have been facing for nigh on generations. Morgan, what do you think about the conversations happening around pirating anything, whether it's books, TVs, movies, whatever?
Well, I'm sorry I didn't think to wear anything from Hot Topic. That was a lack of foresight on my part. But I tried looking around and see if I had anything from there in my office, but I don't. To your point, I heard the comment. I don't know that Sony was the first to say it. They've certainly been the loudest to say it, the buying isn't owning statement. And the corollary of, piracy isn't theft, stealing isn't a crime. While I would love to tell you I agree with that sentiment, there are people with more legal clout than myself who seem to disagree with that, even if I agree with it in theory by that corollary. That said, I think I take I think I take an interesting take on this because of the fact that, like, very much like you said, Victoria does. I am the person that if someone comes to piracy or unrelated and says, "Hi, I would love to read your book. I cannot afford it. May I have a free book?" And my response to them is, "Yes, please give me your email. I will send you an ebook." I've done this with all three of my books now. I have no issue doing that, and I've told multiple people that. One of the things I actively encourage and have for a long time is when people buy my book, if you are buying it, I tell them, cool, do that. I appreciate it. I love you for doing that. Please also consider grab this ISBN and submit it to your library for them to get the ebook. So that, it gives access to folks who don't otherwise have the ability to get a book. What success that's had, I couldn't tell you. There's not an easy way to check that across book libraries, but I think it's something that, authors have ways to self-promote for that to curb piracy. But I think that to a certain extent, piracy is going to happen, whether I like it or not. And it's going to happen to authors of all strokes, whether that be your incredibly well-known folks like your Stephen King's, Ursula Le Guin's, those folks who their books are everywhere, or whether that be independent authors. The frequency which it happens to independent authors, I would argue, is less than a mainstream author, just purely by math. But also the impact, I think, is then stronger because, like, if two people, let's say over the course of this year, go and they get my book from X website, whatever, they find it pirated, that's $5-6 depending on which books they buy. That in a lot of years can make up high single to low double digits of what I make in a year, if not more. Because most independent authors fall in one of two categories: true self-publish or small press. Small press, you at least have some level of backing from the press or whatnot. True self-published authors, of which I fall in that category, you're paying for cost of pretty much damn near everything. If not everything, you may be able to avoid some stuff where you can do it yourself. I own my own editing business. I do some of my own editing, so I can mitigate a little bit of the cost, but still need professional editors, still need, all those different things. And you can't make that back without piracy, or if piracy is happening. But by the same token, if your book is out there and your book is getting read, regardless of how it's getting read, there is an argument to be made that that is a positive for you. I think that there's different ways to go about looking at that. If somebody is reading and they just read it, it's great. Thank you for reading my book. If somebody reads and reviews, even better. Somebody reads and tells a friend about it, even if they don't leave a review. Admittedly, that makes me happy because they cared enough to tell someone about it. There are a limited number of benefits that comes out of piracy, but it in no way outweighs the challenges that it can present, especially for self-published authors.
Exactly. Tyler, what do you think?
Piracy is one of those things that, as a business major by trade, we've learned a lot about it and it's been something that's been on my radar as a business professional because I have published a lot of articles, both for academic journals and professional trade journals. And I've seen my work taken without being credited. And, sometimes that's kind of like piracy where you're trying to make a name for yourself, make a life for yourself by getting these articles published and they still don't credit you. So I think it's a very, as somebody who has experienced that aspect, it's very demeaning. And knowing that somebody is taking your work and using it for their own benefit when you've poured everything, your heart, your soul, your, you know, just everything you can given to this product, and somebody takes it without your permission and puts it on these piracy websites or buys that ebook and starts reselling it to other people. I mean, I just it's hard for me to really wrap my head around how and why somebody would do that, knowing that it hurts especially for independent authors and self-published authors and small trades. And I'm not saying that anybody should go out there and pirate a book from one of the big five by any means, but I mean it especially hurts the people that are really working their ass off to get somewhere, and that haven't got there yet. And it's just, I don't know how else to say it besides it's a disgusting thing for somebody to do, to do that to somebody and try to really hurt somebody like that and steal their work, take credit for their work when they've put so much hard work into it. I mean, blood, sweat, tears. If you're not an author, then and you're just pirating books, you don't know the amount of effort and the amount of stress and the amount of time that goes into building that product.
I think one of the things you brought up there is really interesting. The idea of purely stealing, pirating, whatever, a book versus stealing, pirating, whatever, and then taking credit for it. I think that those, while related, are distinctly different things. And one of them seems like a much more personal crime than the other.
Yeah.
At least that's how I look at it. Like, I am, although I would be and have been annoyed that my books, have been pirated, and I've seen that come up. At the same point in time, it kind of goes back to if someone were to get the book and read it because they got it off of archive.org for free or whatever, somebody just randomly put it up there, like, I'm annoyed, but like at the same point in time, like, yay, somebody reading my book. If someone took my book and said, this is mine now, it's like, well, no, that's extremely different.
Yeah. So I think we can all agree that if authors are willing to offer free copies of their books to people who want to read them but can't afford it, and if those people are willing to leave reviews, especially if those people are willing to leave reviews or just talk about the book or share about it, I think we can all agree that that could help curb a lot of piracy. But there was something that I had to think about when I was thinking about this subject. Amazon is at its core a capitalist venture that has often mishandled piracy issues of the books that have been published through them. So if Amazon finds out that people that are publishing through them are giving away free copies of their book, are they going to find a way to punish the authors?
So I ran into a situation like this with Amazon, weirdly enough, not specifically from like a piracy standpoint, but with one of my previous books, I had thought I had taken it off of all the various platforms I'd made it available on. I got it enrolled in KDP Select, put it on sale, realized after the fact I missed one platform. They caught it before I did. And they're like, yo, don't do this. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't realize I missed it. And they're like, okay, fine. And like, admittedly, that is much more chill than I had expected Amazon to be, considering all the horror stories I had. To be fair, I'm sure that part of it was I've had an account with Amazon as a writer for, at that point it was 9 years. Maybe the fact is been there 9 years and the first time they've run into anything, it's like, okay, maybe that's it. And maybe the people who are more habitual line steppers are doing it with new accounts. And, I don't know why they were that lenient, but I was very glad that they were. In the discussion that came out of that, I kind of wondered, is what you described the case? Like if I were to go and donate a copy to the library, just like, here, take this EPUB file and donate to that, would they take issue with that? And the way I understand their terms and conditions, if it is a true donation of some sort or a gift, it is a non-issue. There's a difference between that and making it available for free. So I think as long as it's not like being publicly displayed as, hey, it is free here, that is one thing. If you just like send it to your friend by email, I believe the way that their terms and conditions reads, it shouldn't go against it. That said, your point of, well, they do mishandle a lot is true.
What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, Amazon, the Zon is gonna Zon. Um,
The Zon is
they're
gonna Zon.
they're going to find ways to stick it to the little man, and they're, you know, to Morgan's point, they are going to be the ones that find you violating their rules first, but they're going to find the authors before they're going to find the scammers. I don't know why. Don't know how it happens that way, but it feels like the creatives are the ones who are targeted more than the scammers. And maybe it's because the scammers have bots set up through AI that are continuously creating these accounts, and as soon as they're being deleted, it could just be a we don't see them punishing the scammers because the scammers are so relentless. But at the same time, they often are known for mishandling some things. And for me, I'm torn on Amazon. I think it's a convenience. You can find a lot of good products on there for great prices. You have to be very careful because there are some not so great products at, really good prices, seemingly really good prices. But at the end of the day, Amazon, look, Amazon takes a 55% cut, or wants a 55% wholesale discount for anybody trying to sell on their website. As an author, you make $1, maybe two off of that book. How is an author, you sell 100 books, that's only $100 in a month. Yeah, I mean it makes a difference, but it's not the kind of money that people need to survive on their writing. Whereas if an author sells through their website, they can make anywhere between $6 or $7 a book. And if they sell 100 books, that's $600 to $700.
Yeah.
And that's why we at Tea with Coffee Media really push our website sales, and our authors push our website sales, because they know that Amazon is taking Amazon. It's not just Amazon, it's all major, online distributors like Walmart, like Barnes and Noble and Books a Million and Waterstone and all that stuff, because they have to make money too on it. Do they have to make that much money on it?
Probably not.
That's a question for
Shareholders
another
disagree with that.
episode. Yes, their owners definitely disagree with that. Um,
Yeah.
but and I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, is the almighty dollar for Amazon. And that's what I mean by the Zon is going to Zon. They're going to do what's best for the dollar, the bottom line at the end of the day. Um, and as a business owner, I get doing what's best for your bottom line, but at the same time, it's got to be an ethical thing to do too, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Something.
I think. Go ahead, Kels.
Well, I was just thinking about what you said, Morgan, about how it was Amazon's like terms of services that prevent them from doing stuff like that. The problem that I have with that is they make the rules. As I once learned from Brennan Lee Mulligan, I don't know if are you familiar with Brennan Morgan?
Yeah.
Okay. He was talking about how he was once a camp counselor who was handling a bully who had gotten to the point where the bully mouthed off enough that one of the kids hauled off and hit him. And the rules of the camp were zero tolerance for violence. So the bully thought the kid who hit him was going to get like expelled from the camp, and Brennan said, "No, he's staying." And the kid said, "But that's against the rules." And Brennan got face to face with this like 12-year-old kid and said, "Number one, we make the rules and we don't want to follow them right now. So welcome to institutions." And I think that's the problem that I have is the moment that this starts negatively affecting Amazon's dollar is the moment they are going to change the rules and say, no, you can't give away free copies of your books, even if it's ethical, even if you chose to do it.
Sure, and I see that, but by the same token, it's not like Amazon is particularly transparent about a lot of things anyway. I actually just had I actually just had this come up relatively recently. It's something that I went and actually did the math on because I was genuinely curious. So I remember seeing some tweet or post or whatever. I don't remember where it was off the top of my head, but somebody was very excited that they had their first month ever where they sold 1,000 books, and like that's the dream, to be able to sell just a egregious volume of books. On that same day, I went in and looked at mine, and I'd happened to have gotten a sale on one of my books that day. And I did the math on it and come to find out that sale was my 200th sale. And I know just based on some facial reactions, the immediate thought is, wait, why did you have to do math to figure that out? Because most people who have been on Amazon, they recognize that, okay, hey, you have the dashboard and all you have to do is switch to lifetime and it will tell you the number of books you have sold. Now, for clarity here, I have 3 books. I had all 3 selected. So one like I was doomed individual. But there are 2 things that you have to keep track of when looking at Amazon books. One of which is very obvious. The other is not broadly said. The one that's obvious is free books. You run a Kindle Countdown promotion where it's free. Those free books do still show up on your dashboard. So when I say I sold 200 books since May of 2016, I'm not including free books in that total. And I pulled up the numbers because it's generally wanted to explain this correctly. Over that same time, I've given away 168 free books. It's like, okay, yay. 168 people have some copy of one of my books out there. Most of that came in a very short span, but neither here nor there. So if you take this 168 away, it works out to a really nice, that should be 400 books sold in 8 years. Well, that's more than 200, literally double. So how does that work? Here's the other thing that you have to keep in mind. With, the Zon goes on, you have to think about the fact that they own several different companies. They are the company that bought CreateSpace, which is where I did the self-publishing for my first book through. They are the company that now owns Goodreads. If you do a giveaway on Goodreads as an author, you can give away either physical paperback copies that you supply and sell, or you can give away ebooks from Amazon, which is great. Just conceptually, they take care of all the processing and whatnot. Is the cost worth it? That's probably a separate discussion, deeper dive, but it's a thing. So when I released my first novel, I did 2 giveaways in the span of about 2 years. According to Amazon, in those 2 years, I sold 135 and 116 copies of my book that year. However, that's because I did 2 giveaways of 100 books each. They count those as sold copies. You make $0 off of those.
Yeah.
So what is effectively happening is, like, let's ignore the other books I sold just for sake of clarity and discussion. I would have sold 200 books in those 2 years just from Goodreads giveaways per Amazon looks at. And, those are books that were taken and sent out from Amazon to insert Goodreads user here. Great, cool. They didn't pay for them. It's a giveaway win. Good for them. That effectively, instead of making, $1 or $2 off of the book copy, as Tyler was saying, I effectively paid $1 per book copy because it was $99 then. It's $139 now.
Ugh. Jesus.
And that makes me real hesitant to do another giveaway, even though I have another book out. Because for all intents and purposes, instead of, making, even if it was just $1, I'm making a little bit more than $1 per copy. So instead of making $100, I'm down $100. It's a net swing of $200 in that case, which is now more.
Yeah.
So, like, for as much as Amazon certainly is concerned about their bottom line, and justifiably so as a business, it's not like they also don't have practices that make their numbers look better, but don't exactly help authors.
Yeah. Out here fudging with the numbers.
So that's why I came out
So-
to 200 when I did that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on 200, though. I mean, that's still
That is
awesome.
amazing. That is amazing. And
Yeah.
you should
Hopefully
be
the next 200 won't take 8 years.
hopefully.
All right. So before we get too much more into the Zon's gonna Zon black hole, let's let's jump over to our absolutely brand new ad put together by our very own Yaresh, our lead of the art department. He finished this for us over the in between seasons, so we are so excited to show it to you. If you like it, check out our book marketing services. We also do trailers like this for books. So, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Nestled in the foreboding backwoods of Virginia, Madame Eldridge's behavior program promotes only 3 official rules. Firstly, what happens here stays here. Secondly, all 8 steps must be completed, no ifs, ands, or buts. Thirdly, each boy is referred to by his problem, not his name. There is one unspoken rule: don't enter the forbidden 3rd floor bedroom, which belonged to a boy who disappeared from the house eons ago.
And we're back after that amazing ad by Uresh. And if you like it, be sure you leave a comment and tell Uresh how amazing he is, because he is actually, let's see, besides the board, he
I
is our
think he is
longest
the
tenured
original.
employee.
I
Yes.
think he is the
Well,
original.
Kayla was here since the beginning too.
That's true.
But Uresh was he's our second longest employee. What a great
That's
kid.
amazing.
We've
Oh my
known him for
gosh.
seen him grow so much. Anyway,
And such a sweetheart, God.
yes, he is. He is. Gosh, Greg, I could talk about him all day. We need to have him on the podcast.
Yeah, let's get Uresh on the podcast. That's a smart
Let's
idea.
let's do it. We're doing it this year. We're going back to the drawing board and changing the whole season to get Uresh on. I love it.
We have
All
gotten
right.
severely off topic.
All right, so let's jump into this topic because, like I said, I'm super excited. We've got a knowledgeable guest. So Morgan, for our listeners out there who maybe aren't familiar with the term visual novelist, kind of, or maybe have a very basic understanding, can you give our listeners like a brief explanation of what they are and how you got into them?
Sure. So I think that a lot of the confusion from visual novel comes from the prevalence of graphic novels, which are similar but not the same way. So what a lot of people think of when they hear visual novels, they think of graphic novels. So like at a kid's level, that's like your Captain Underpants, Dog Man, those type of books, manga, those type of things. Those are graphic novels. That's what a lot of people think of when they hear visual novel. And in essence, it sort of is a novel that is primarily delivered through a visual medium in a little bit of a different way. When I'm referring to visual novel, I am referring more to the game side of things. So telling a novel style or novel length story through a computer game in what is effectively a dialogue driven interface. So if you're familiar with like old text-based games, they're kind of the forerunners of visual novels. So it's very much text-driven. You see a door, what do you do to it? Knock. Like that was kind of where that started. And then it eventually adapted and evolved to still screen art, to some level of animation. The actual controls of the game are usually fairly simple. It's just you're reading. You may have some limited choices similar to a choose your own adventure style novel, but they're not super in-depth compared to a traditional video game. It's not open world by any means. But the point of the game is primarily to tell a story, whatever that story may be, very similar to a novel, hence kind of using that term.
Gotcha. So what really got you into wanting to start putting together these visual novels? Like what was your introduction to the world?
So I was trying to think, but we were talking before we started. I still can't remember what the game was I played as a kid that was very visual novel style driven, but I was introduced to computers and computer games much earlier than I was like a lot of TV things, just because of what was around. And this was in the 90s, so it's certainly not common in that age, whereas it's much more common now. But I got pretty heavily into computer games and whatnot. A lot of them were very text driven and whatnot, be they true text-based games or games that are more quiz style, like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and things like that. That eventually drove me into liking visual novels. One of the things that I like about the visual novel is that I am very much a reader. I don't get to read as much as I used to, between life, family, all those things. In the visual novel, the style it's presented in reads quicker than a lot of books do. Either through manually changing like the scroll speed in the game, if you have those type of controls in it, or just it tends to, by virtue of the user interface, be broken up into smaller parts, smaller chunks. You read through it faster. They also tend, in a lot of cases, to not be as long as a true novel. you see things like, Tolkien and George R.R. Martin, they write these, hundreds of thousands of word epics. Visual novels tend not to be that long. Mine might get over 100,000, but that's my own mistake, and I am regretting it in advance.
Understood.
But
Understood.
that's what interested me in it, because it was like, I like doing these, and it's like, there are things that I saw in them that I liked and that I didn't like, and some of what I didn't like, the portrayal of consent, be that the portrayal of trans and other LGBTQIA characters, be that just like people doing things that are very clearly illegal and it being treated as good. Like those things, like, okay, these things annoy me, but especially if you get into visual novels that are more on sites that tend to have them, they tend to skew having more adult themes, be that violence, be that sexuality, whatever it may be. And unfortunately, it kind of comes with the territory. And I eventually got to the point, it's like, no, I want to create one that doesn't have to rely on those things in order to tell the story I want in the way that I want. So that's kind of what prompted me to do it.
I love that. Kels, did you know about visual novels prior to us kind of planning this podcast?
Yeah, visual novels were never really my big thing, but I grew up as an otaku. I entered the anime world at the tender age of 12 with Yu-Gi-Oh! And for 9 long years after that point, until probably I hit college, I was that's how I got my start with writing, is I started writing fan fiction, and I was reading graphic novels, and otome games were kind of a big deal. I was kind of into the I liked the self-insert dating stuff and the reverse harems. Like, gee, only informed a lot of things in my adulthood, but so yeah, I was never the big visual novel person, but it's always kind of been on the fringe of my understanding, and I get the appeal. I absolutely do. So
Yeah.
I could absolutely see myself doing one day, but I feel the need to get the confidence in order to do it. And part of that is I don't feel like my art skills are strong enough. But Morgan, as we've talked about earlier, you can make it fit to your style so that it works for your skill level.
You can. Admittedly, that was a major reason that I held off on it. Like, what's interesting is that, even though I've been a writer much longer than I've done visual novels, I started visual novel work in early 2023. I started writing short stories in 2010. So literally decade plus of experience before I started that. I never intended to be a writer when I became a writer. It was just, it turned into my therapy work, became something I liked. With a visual novel, like, it's always been something in the back of my head, like, oh, I wish I could create something like this. But, didn't necessarily know what story I wanted to tell. And until then, I was just content with, okay, I will play this. Like, very much like you, I liked the dating sim style games, which are oftentimes told through visual novel style. Not exclusively, but pretty heavily. And so, like, there's an inherent there is an inherent immersiveness to visual novels in most cases, because of the fact that in most cases your character is self-insert. And I think what makes that interesting for people who are trying to do some level of crossover, and I've met a couple of folks who have done some level of crossover, is that you tend to find that people who primarily focus on visual novels is what they do. They love writing those self-insert characters, but if somebody comes from the traditional writing world and goes over and starts doing visual novels, they very much frame the characters much like they would in a novel. It's not self-insert in a lot of cases. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing that tends to happen within the genre, just based on who writes it. And like you're saying, your concern is your art skills. I'm bad at art. My stick figures get made fun of by my 5-year-old, 6-year-old. And he's right to do it. They are bad. But I have a lovely cover artist, Lauren, who has done cover art for 2 of my 3 books. And I'm like, hey, you do digital art. You want to do something that's more up your alley than book covers? And it's like, yes. So I've been working with her, commissioning art to do art assets for the game, which is much more time intensive than book covers. And I never realized, like, I knew it was more. I never realized how much more it was until I started working with it.
Yeah, that's we've actually discussed quite a few times with our VP of operations, Caitlin. She wants us to get into visual novels so bad. And so I think you may see Tea with Coffee Media in the visual novel game before too long. But could you walk us through that creative process of developing a visual novel from, like I said, like you said, the initial concept whenever it came to you to you don't have a final product quite yet, but too close to completion?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like when I decided I wanted to do this, I did have one level of prerequisite background that really helped me with forming that story idea. In 2019 and 2020, I had an idea that I wanted to do a story that I told via Twitter solely with polls. Very similar to what Susan Denard did with her book. And I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me, but it was the big one that she did that turned into something. Never read it. I found out about her doing that after I was a third of the way done with my story. It's like, oh, this has been a thing done before. Okay. But it was the short story is very much the sci-fi dystopian thing that I've traditionally done. Is like, okay, it's what I wanted to tell. I had planned on that story being something that I just did over December as a way that I didn't want to do NaNoWriMo that year. I'm just going to try to do a short story through Twitter. And it started in December 2019. It lasted through Labor Day of 2020 and ended up being 85,000 words.
Holy shit.
Yes.
Echoed. Dittoed.
Now, part of it was because people were interested in it and I wanted to keep going with it. But I also estimated very poorly how much the story was going to take. Hell. So when I went in and was kind of designing this, like I knew conceptually like the idea of what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do a dating style, sim style thing because it was the visual novel style I was most familiar with and therefore the easiest to follow tropes or subvert tropes as applicable. The easiest to be able to point out the things that were problematic that bothered me. But then I wanted to be able to take it in the way that I wanted to. I wanted to be able to tell it in a way, like I was saying, that is positive towards LGBTQIA characters without overtly sexualizing them. Like it is an erotic visual novel. It is intended to have that adult theming, but you can do that without making somebody an object. And that was part of the intent of what I was going for. Part of my choice in that was I chose to make the lead a trans female lead. And in doing that, I think that it's something that you tend to find in visual novels. The fact that the main character of the story, Harper, is trans female is important to the conflict that begins the story, and that's pretty much it. Because like it's the inciting incident. Her getting divorced is what kicks off the story. And this happened because of, her spouse didn't want to be with her, be translated. Cool. That kicks off our story, and then you can then insert other people. And I talked this through with a couple of my friends. I was like, here's what I'm thinking I want to do at a very basic level. Have a handful of options as my starting point. Like, Harper can meet 6 different women in the story, and she could end up dating with them. They'll each have their own paths, and then like ideally, if people are interested enough, and if I have the time to do it, if I like creating this enough, maybe I'll introduce some other characters down the line. Here's a few ideas for that, but like those are much flimsier. And so like I had that basic framework down. When I write from a traditional novel standpoint, I am very much somebody who structures and outlines things. I have to, so that I don't forget what I was talking about. For as much fun as pantsing a story is, I forget what I'm doing. And therefore it makes my stories incoherent. So I've had to learn to outline for my sanity. And it helps with something like this because, even just planning out the introduction of the story, like it's, be able to do, you meet character A, character B, character C, so on and so forth. And then you can choose which path you go down. Outlining becomes really helpful in that situation because you have to not just keep track of, okay, well, who does this person know? What information about Harper do each of these characters know about them that's plot relevant? What choices have they made? Like how, as is the case with dating sims, like what is their level of romance or caring or whatever term you want to use? Because that term changes in every game with each other. Mine literally just calls it points because I enjoy taking the piss out of ideas. And it's fun that way. So like, I like it's the concept is just as much, I wanted to be able to tell this story I wanted to tell and, to be able to poke fun at the just problematic things you see in those type of games, while also, just being able to be like, okay, I want to take a while and explore, this character and the various people that they interact with. Like, yes, Harper's the main character, but like, there's a big reason. Like, I wanted to go through 6 different character studies essentially for each of the primary love interests to be able to be like, okay, well, you may look at this girl and traditionally in most dating sims like, oh, she is blonde girl with big boobs, she is clearly the slut, like that is the archetype that falls for. And then the first time she opens her mouth, she is clearly Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And like, that level of subversion, be it at a visual level or at a metatextual level, I think is interesting because whereas in a book, you have to rely on the words, the visual novel gives you multiple ways to juxtapose that expectation subversion within it.
So, do you think, as somebody who has written visual novels and written novels and is developing a visual novel, do you think that it's easier to emotionally engage your audience for players of the visual novels than it is for written novels, or vice versa?
I think it depends to a certain extent. I will say that, it is going to differ obviously a little bit person to person. For me, writing it, like the experience of getting engaged writing in the story is so much easier from visual novel because that quick pacing I talked about earlier. And that I think does translate over to readers in a lot of cases, because people with books, whether they mean to or not, they'll at times have a habit of skimming through things and they're not as invested, whereas those shorter chunks make it easier to invest in visual novel. That said, there is a counter corollary to this is, it is a game for all intents and purposes. It is harder to hook somebody and keep them staying in a game than it is in a book. People are going to a book. They are generally more patient with okay, it's going to take a little time to introduce characters. It's going to take a little bit of time to build the story. It has to flow a little quicker than that with a game in most cases. Now, visual novels do subvert that a little bit because if you're playing a visual novel that there is some character building like a novel. Like that's inherent with the genre. But it is still a much quicker process. And effectively, what you have to do then is you have to have some sort of hook, whether that hook is humor, whether that is an interesting story beat, whether that is nudity, whatever it may be that hooks them right out of the gate. You have to have that much quicker than in a book, I think. And I see a lot of people that argue like you have to have that in the first chapter of a book in many cases. And I don't think that's inherently wrong. You got to have it real quick in a visual novel in order to get people stay and to get invested in those characters.
Makes a lot of sense. Never thought about it like that, but yeah, Kelsey, did you ever think about it like that?
I never did, and what I find interesting is like I am one of those people who will lose attention in a book if you don't grab me by the first chapter. And then what I find interesting is I take the time from my first chapters to set up the stasis of the story to be like, this is where we're beginning, so that you can understand the journey that we're about to go through. And I feel like maybe that's counterintuitive, just understanding myself.
Yeah, that happens. I'm the same way. I feel I am much better at starting a visual novel than I am a regular book. And I've done 3 regular books. First chapter, it's like, no, I need to explain to you what has happened. Even if I'm writing a sequel, it's like, you need to understand where you're at. Like, I very much relate to that.
And I picked that up from just being a theater major and understanding the Greek way of how the plays are supposed to go.
So one of the things that's interesting, as I was writing through this story, it's like, okay, I have the story I want to tell, but how do I potentially do this? And from a artistic standpoint with a novel, there you have a lot of things you can rely on. You have things like the hero's journey. You have a lot of things that 5-act structure that you can build upon. Visual novels, you have a little bit more you can play with there. You can go the theater route. You can go closer to a novel style route. You can just go the improv comedy route. This and then, so on and so forth, the quick hitting things. And I don't know that there's inherently something that I like better or worse as a player for it. If your story is interesting enough, the format is less of a concern to me as a player in that specific case. As a writer, I find myself taking inspiration from places that shouldn't be. Like when I've been writing my books, one of the biggest sources of inspiration I have for my written books, weirdly enough, is prop comedy. So Monty Python, Letterkenny, things along those lines. Like that's what inspires a lot of the way I storytell in my books. And it's really fun because my editor is a stage manager at a theater. So it combines it very well. From a visual novel standpoint, I'm like, okay, well, it is different. It's a little faster pace, just kind of through necessity of it. It's like, okay, well, what that is going to entail, what that's going to cause to happen is, whereas in a novel, if I'm setting up a story in the first couple of chapters or whatnot, I can explain the setting, I can explain background, I explain whatever. Visual novels in most cases are pretty darn dialogue heavy, mine included. So you need some level of something to set it up. I actively chose to have a Greek chorus in mine because of the point, okay, I'm willing to stage set. I can't just have, everything be in Harper's head, because you're kind of playing her in more of a omniscient mode, even though you do hear her thoughts a little bit. So it's like, you know what, screw it. We're adding a chorus of her fellow employees, and we're just solving it that way. And some of this is played for laughs. Like one of the coffee shop employees literally refers to the owner as the Corey Fayas. And Harper just like, the what? He's our manager. Because, like, if you're visual novels is very easy to break the fourth wall. It is very easy to break it too much. So you have to have someone playing the straight man archetype within scenes. And I think one of the things with visual novels that's interesting is that you can play the straight man archetype with multiple different characters when it makes sense to do so because of how fast it moves. So like, with some interactions, Harper's very much the straight man archetype in the scenes that she is in. In others, she is very much the comedic relief, and it is very contextually based.
So can I ask, do you also have a little bit of like Marx Brother kind of inspiration with the story structure as well, or the prop comedy?
So from my book standpoint, not really, just because that, like, from the book standpoint, it is much more banter prop comedy driven, which is less of what the Marx Brothers did, although I do love them. Not exactly what I'm like.
Okay.
From a standpoint of the game, I am limited in that regard by my ability to art.
Right.
I have had the opportunity to work with Lauren to get character art. I've been able to find Creative Commons public domain images for backgrounds and whatnot, but it's something that will be built into the game more as it grows. Just visual in-jokes in the background. One of the things I did, it's like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do for this scene. There's a scene in the intro. One of the characters that Harper meets, Lake, is a streamer. And she's like, I know that streaming makes me money. I know that it can be lucrative to do things like a Fansly or OnlyFans and do cosplay, because I also do cosplay. I can make money off of this too. Harper's like, oh, well, I'm also a photographer. Let me take, pictures of you. And so I have this idea of what I want to do. And it's very much like this very, very chill, safe for work, like cosplay photo shoot to introduce the concept of like what Harper's side job is. But I cannot draw this. And it felt weird just like sticking the background of this park that they're in, taking the pictures there. So literally what I did is I just went and, made the screen side splash screen and just literally wrote the text on there in the background. So it's literally text set dressing until I can get the art done. So like randomly in the background is just like, and this is a girl on a bench. She is seductively pointing up the very bottom of her pant leg. You can almost see an ankle.
I love that.
So, where do you draw? You've touched on it a little bit, but where do you draw the inspiration from when creating your characters, your storylines, and and both your written and your visual novels?
Trauma.
Outside of trying.
Well, that just makes you a writer.
Good night, everybody.
Is that not the one word response you're supposed to give? Oh no.
No, it is.
Where do I draw inspiration from? So I think that, weirdly enough, I think that with this game, it's been a little easier to draw inspiration. A little easier to draw inspiration from like what I, as a player of visual novels, a fan of visual novels, liked and don't like. So it's very easy. Like I had ideas of what I wanted to do and what I thought I could do better having the writing background I did. From a book standpoint, like I was saying, like I didn't go into writing to intend to be a writer. I did it because I couldn't afford therapy. And so I just wrote until I could afford therapy again. It's like, had friends be like, oh, these are good. And it's like, you're lying. Stop that. And and then they convinced me to, write more, and here we are. From the visual novel standpoint, like, I saw that there were things being done poorly. But weirdly enough, one of the things that made me feel like, okay, I can do this at some point and it could be useful. There is a game that it came out well over a decade ago at this point. There is a game called Katawa Shujo. It is a visual novel. And if you talk to people who have played adult visual novels, they are almost across the board familiar with this game. It is a game that on paper sounds like it should not work. And the reason it sounds like it should not work is the way that they pitched it is, what if you have your self-insert main character and they are a high school senior, they are meeting these various girls at school, and all these girls are, the reason that they're all at school together is they all have a significant disability. The main character had a heart failure, and he is like, if his heart gets going too fast, it could kill him. Another girl is an amputee. Another one has lost multiple limbs. There's a burn victim. It's like a frame like that, like, okay, this has such the potential to be such a disaster in so many ways. And then they handle everyone as a character in one of the best writing ways I have ever seen. They are very much, the theme of this story is you are more than your scars. You are more than your limitations. And it is beautifully written. The one thing I'm most jealous of is the music. The music in that game is phenomenal, and I do not have the time to do music composition. But if I could, that's what I would love to get, something like that. But it made me realize that, oh, hey, you can tell a story well. You can tell a long story. That game, if you play it all the way through for all the various endings, it's like a 30-hour game, which is obnoxious for a visual novel. And yet it's beautifully done. There were very few updates. It was just a group of people. They came. It is a free game, and they're like, yeah, we're done with this. We don't want to do it again. Just like, nope, this is our one-off. Have fun. And it's beautiful. And that gave me a lot of, hope that you could do that. And it was just a matter of then, okay, well, eventually finding the what story I wanted to tell.
Right.
And the fact that such a diverse story came out a decade ago is really powerful to hear. So
yeah, I think it was 2012. I'm gonna look this up because now I'm curious.
I'm pretty sure it was, because I remember hearing about this game. I didn't recognize it by name when you brought it up, but when you described it, I was like, no, I've heard about this. I remember this being discussed, at least on YouTube videos that I saw.
Yeah, it's January of 2012 was when it was released. And it's actually done in the same coding software that I'm doing it in, which is Ren'Py. And Ren'Py was not as powerful then. What's interesting is that what's interesting with that game is that I think that really became the first major game that was showing that, like, okay, you can have a game that is still adult in nature and not be an asshole.
Yeah.
And they did a phenomenal job, genuinely. Like, it's like, you go on Metacritic and all these game sites, it's like, no, this is like a high 90s game. Like, they're like, no, it's good.
Yeah. Incredible.
Let's shift gears a little bit from visual novels, because you're also a written novelist, and we want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that. You just said you sold 200 books, and you've probably given away another 200. So you've got 400 books out there in the world. In your
Minimum.
experience, yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What are the key elements that make a written novel successful in capturing and retaining the audience's interest?
So I don't know that I have a good answer for that. And the reason I say that is not necessarily like, self-deprecating on my part, but I think it's more of there is a distinct difference between retaining an audience and selling your book to an audience. I feel like I do good with the audience retention part of things, of the two. My stories, regardless of what kind we're talking about, or visual novel or book, are very character driven. Visual novel, you kind of have to, but in books, that's not necessarily the route you have to go. I've chosen to go it because I think it's the book I want to read in many cases. And if I don't want to read the book I'm writing, what's the point? Because I can read it way too many times.
Exactly.
So like I feel like I do that well. There was I was putting together the work or like the prep ads I was making for Wood Pusher, which is the book that came out at the beginning of this year. And I was asking some of my friends, just what their thoughts were, and like what they liked about the book and whatnot. One of the people said that part of why she read my books was because I cornered the market on dumpster fires. And it's because like the main character in the two novels I've written, Erica, is such an absolute mess that you can't help but root for her, despite the fact that she gets in her way more than a human should. She's trying her best, but she's bad at math, I think is the rough quote on it. And it's like you root for someone to get better, and everyone knows a person like Erica, and either they very much like, I know that person, I want them to get better, or they feel like that person, especially because like Erica's girlfriend in the series is a girl named Abby, who is an android who was literally coded in such a way that she is mathematically a perfect match for Erica. And she is incredibly bright, incredibly emotionally intelligent. We learn as the book series goes on, she has a lot of other talents that just by virtue of being an android that like humans couldn't necessarily do by themselves and whatnot. And it's like, I think a lot of people relate to the, oh, well, I am very much the person. I feel like my partner is more well put together than me. I feel like I am the mess. I think people relate to that in some ways. Or in some ways they don't relate to it and they feel like it's cathartic to see someone like that. Like, I think once you read the books, I have an easier time retaining people. It's just getting to read the books, and marketing sucks. I'm not good at it. I have one talent at shit posting.
Yeah. Speaking as the VP of marketing, I agree.
It's hard. Like, I'm not even saying that like to belittle anything. It sucks because it is so difficult.
It is.
I do marketing as my main gig. And I tell people all the time, marketing a book is harder than marketing any product I've ever marketed before. I mean,
oh yeah, this is why I work in IT.
Yeah. So, Morgan, thank you so much for all this insightful conversation that we've had. We want to play a quick game with you.
Okay.
It's just going to be one word answers, this or that is what we're calling it. So I'm going to give you 5 different scenarios, and you tell me which option you would choose.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Summer or winter?
Winter.
Marvel or DC?
Neither. Not
Pizza
a
or
huge fan of
burger?
superhero movies.
Nice. Pizza or burger?
Burger. It's close.
And my favorite, because we're tea with coffee media, coffee or tea?
Coffee. I like both, but I would rather have
That
both.
was that the hardest
I say
question?
that while drinking tea, but I can't go to sleep if I drink coffee.
Yes, I get
Aha.
that. I get that.
I drink both regularly, but if I try drinking coffee at 9 o'clock at night, you will be talking to me at 9 in the morning. I will not have slept.
Sounds about like me.
And you need as
So,
much sleep as you can get for those little morning people.
Yep.
well, Morgan, why don't you leave our audience with some words of wisdom, some advice? Tell them where they can connect with you, where they can find your work, the names of all your books, and we'll include all of this in the description of the video as well, so that people can find it there. But yeah, go for it. The floor
Sure.
is yours.
So, so a few different things. My website is anotherindiewriter.com. Nice, simple, easy to remember one. I've got links to most everything I do up there, including a link out to my game studio, to the editing service that I run, everything along those lines. I have 3 books out there, all 3 of which are in the process of getting redone under this pen name. I had previously done my work under another name, working on getting it moved over. That said, in terms of the books that are imminently getting re-released under this pen name, there are 2 that are novels. One is a novel named Kotov Syndrome. It was the 2021 Queer Indie Award winner for Best Dystopian Novel. And
Nice.
then its sequel, Wood Pusher, came out in January of this year. So those 2 books are out. I'll start working on book 3 whenever I get done with the editing projects I'm working on. Hopefully. And then I have another book out there that will be re-releasing much later in the year. That's a short story compilation called An Epilogue to Innocence. That was my first book I wrote. That was from 2016. That one will re-release later in the year. I don't know if that one, depending on when this goes up, will be available yet. The other 2 are imminent. So unless you're literally releasing it right when we stop talking, we're good. And then social media, pretty much everywhere. I'm either Another Indie Writer, or on Blue Sky, it's anotherindiewriter.com, because they let you do URLs. So yeah, and then the game is the only other thing I wanted to mention, because we spent a lot of time talking about that. The game is called Starting Over. It's on itch.io. And currently, at least until I can finish paying artist for cover art, it's literally just the title card, if you go on it, is a black screen with the word sexy image scrawled on it in handwriting.
Perfect.
Visual
Perfect.
gags.
Love it.
I
Love
like
it. Well,
it.
Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. We learned I know I personally learned so much, and really, really great insight. We hope our audience learns a lot. This is going to be a great, great kickoff to season 3. So glad we had you on for the first episode. And I just want to say, everybody out there, hang in there. We've got your back. And Kels, anything else you got to say?
May your writer's block stay far away.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, until next episode, see ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.